Okay, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us. I'm going to sort of slow play us into this as I know people kind of come on at different times, but certainly we are super excited today to have Hubert joining us. It's a glorious day, certainly for St. Joe's. And for starters, as we get into this, I do want to just administratively go through some thank yous, I guess. For starters, would like to thank our pastor, Father Paul Kamen, for setting our parish free to imagine and conduct these kinds of events. And I'd also like to say a special thank you to Kayla Rooney. She is the director of lifelong faith formation at the parish. And she really is the one behind the scenes doing all the work to make these things happen, not just this event, but all things around faith formation in our lives. And Kayla is my definition of a living saint. She and her husband, who stays home with their three adopted children, just have an amazing family and an amazing life story. So we are blessed at St. Joe's to have Kayla Rooney on the team. And again, my definition of a living saint. So thank you to Kayla for all the effort that you put into this as well. For those that don't know me, my name is Brian Bach. I've been with the parish for over 4 decades. I was going to say 40 years, but 40 seems so big and 4 seems little. So I'm going to say 4 decades. Before we get started, by the way, I do want to say an opening prayer, just to sort of have everyone open themselves up to what we're going to hear today. So if we could all just take a moment, bow our heads, and say a quick prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Lord, we ask for your presence with us this morning. Please open our hearts and minds as we explore how to bring your truth to our business, work, and lives. Continue, Lord, to breathe life into Hubert as he tirelessly strives to share what he has learned with the rest of the world. Please allow those who hear his message to take away all that is good and in conformity of your purpose for our beautifully diverse humanity, that we all be one as you and your Father are one. In Jesus' name, amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. Well, I'll introduce Hubert. I don't know if he needs an introduction, but for those that don't know, Hubert, real quick, is currently a senior lecturer at Harvard Business School and former chairman and CEO of Best Buy. He is also on the board of directors of Johnson & Johnson and Ralph Lauren Corporations. He's a member of the International Advisory Board of HEC Paris and a trustee of the Minneapolis Institute of Arts. Hubert's been recognized as one of the top CEOs in the world by multiple prestigious sources. He is also the author of a best-selling book that just got released earlier this month. It is The Heart of Business: Leadership Principles for the Next Era of Capitalism. We are going to get into this. This is really going to be the backdrop for our conversation today. It is an incredible book. It took me much longer to read than I thought it would. It's actually a short read. It's just that when you want to remember all of the points that he makes that are good takeaways for you, you end up highlighting a lot and annotating a lot to make those memories happen for you. And I spent a lot of time doing that as I read this. There's a lot of wonderful ideas in here. But without further ado, I guess, welcome, Hubert. Thank you. We are profoundly grateful and super honored to have you join us today.
Good morning, Brian and everyone, and so looking forward to our conversation.
Great. So let's just jump right into this. I think for starters, getting into the book, I don't know if you can see that. It looks like the...
Oh, better. You can now see it. You can, I think you can also see it here, just behind.
There you go.
Conveniently.
Yes, very, very conveniently, strategically placed. Very good. So for starters, you outline in this book the importance of leading with purpose and humanity. Can you tell us a little bit more about that philosophy?
Well, Brian, it starts with really 3 questions. One is, why do we work? You know, is work a curse or punishment because some dude sinned in paradise? Or is work something we do so that we can do something else that's more fun, like maybe watching the Vikings beat the Green Bay Packers? You know, if you're in that camp, have to be careful here. Or is work part of our humanity and part of our calling, part of our fulfillment as human beings, part of our quest for meaning? Or, you know, to quote the Lebanese poet Khalil Gibran, is work love made visible? Of course, it's a choice we make. And, you know, I'm almost tempted to maybe pause for a second and ask every one of the participants, can everybody type in chat, why do you work? Other than, of course, we need to pay the rents and so forth, but beyond that, why do you work? If you can type quickly, maybe one sentence. Why do you work? Oop, we didn't warn everybody that we would do this. To help others, yes. Is Abby your mom or your wife,
She's my
Brian?
daughter.
Is your daughter? Okay,
Yes.
very good.
Oh,
Okay, so
great
I think
answer.
we have majority, at least maybe unanimity in one camp.
Yeah, if we were
Of
to read
that.
a few of these, there's some good ones there.
Yes, and feel fulfilled. Go Best Buy. Yes, of course. Very good. So as we let everyone type in. So it's a first question. It's the question of purpose, individual purpose. But then there's a second question. What is a company? And by the way, if you look at the etymology of the word company, it comes from the late Latin word compagno, which means breaking bread with somebody, right? It's the word companion. And so for me, a company is not a money-making machine, not principally that. It's a human organization made of individuals working together in pursuit of a goal, in pursuit of a purpose. And I learned from a client many years ago that the purpose of a company is not to make money. It's a necessary outcome, but it's not the ultimate purpose. And if you tie it to the first question of why do we work, then of course it has to be to contribute to the common good, to serve others in the same way. And the third fundamental question is, how do we, if you're a leader, and all of us are leaders, right? At the minimum, we're leaders of our lives. How do we mobilize others? Right? Is it the carrot and stick approach? Be careful, right? If you use carrots and sticks, you're going to get donkeys, right? Nothing wrong with donkeys, but that may not be what you want. And I think that what I've learned over the years is, of course, the way you mobilize is by calling on the intrinsic motivation of others, what really drives them. And so one of the things I've learned over the years, and certainly that we've all learned, and Brian, you're now invisible. I don't know what happened. One of the things we've all learned during the crisis is that is the importance of leading from a place of purpose and with humanity, right? It's why are we here? So if you're running Best Buy during the pandemic, are you, what are you doing? You're really helping kids learn from home, people work from home, families eat from home. That's really the purpose you're serving. And when we look at how we interacted with others during this pandemic, I think one of the things we rediscovered, Brian, is that yes, we have employees, but we have individuals who are human beings, right? And for people who are working from home, we saw their family, their dogs, their cats, their Wi-Fi problems. We saw them as full human beings. Same for frontline workers. The emphasis placed on their safety and some of their struggles and so forth. So I think in a world that's faced with this multifaceted crisis, which is the health crisis, the economic crisis, societal issues, racial issues, environmental issues, geopolitical issues. How long do you want me to go? I think that what we need is this, really the reinvention of business around these themes of purpose and humanity, the focus on the shareholder primacy that Milton Friedman tried to establish 50 years ago. That's not working. So we need to reinvent business. And I think the themes of purpose and humanity are really key to creating a future that does not exist yet, but that needs to be better than what we have today.
Yeah, I love it. And maybe if we rewind a little bit and talk about your personal professional arc to how you got there philosophically, where does that come from? Who influenced these ideas in you? Share that a little bit with us.
Yeah, and for like everybody, there's multiple influences, so I'll name a few because otherwise we take everybody's day. And you meant other than you, Brian, who influenced me?
Yeah, sure.
I think if you go back 30 years ago, I remember very vividly two friends who are monks in the congregation of Saint John in France, who asked me to write articles with them on the philosophy and theology of work. And the internet did not exist at the time, search engines did not. So what I did is I took a biblical index and looked at all of the places in the Bible that talk about work. And of course, there's a few places where work is a bit harsh, right, because of the dude that I talked about earlier. But for the most part, you see a very positive light on work, and in particular in service of others. There's some very beautiful, scriptures around that. And so that led us to write these articles on, work as part of our quest for meaning and part of our salvation and our vocation and calling as human beings. So that was a big milestone. About at the same time, there was a client of mine when I was a consultant with McKinsey, who once told me he had come back from a seminar and workshop with other CEOs. And he told me that the purpose of a company is not to make money. It's an imperative, it's an outcome, but you have other imperatives. You have the people imperative, having good people who are properly trained and equipped. The business imperative, you need to have customers. And of course you have a financial imperative, but the financial result is really the consequence of excellence on the people imperative, which leads to excellence on the business imperative, which leads to excellence on the financial imperative. I think we all understand this, but he went beyond that and said, ultimately the goal probably has something to do with touching people, right? Because that's the only thing that's real on the planet. A third, and he had very practical implications, by the way, that everybody can put down. So, for example, when you do your monthly performance review with your team to look at how the business is going, don't start with financial results, end with financial results, right? Start with people and organizations, then go to customers and business, and finish with finance. If you flip it, you'll spend all of your meeting on financial results, and you won't have really gotten to the key drivers of your business. So with the third milestone, Brian, about 20 years ago, so to quote David Brooks, I was at the top of my first mountain. I was successful. I've been a partner at McKinsey. I was on the senior executive team of a major French corporation. But what I experienced was emptiness. There was nothing there. Right? Interesting business problems to solve, but no meaning. So call it my midlife crisis, okay? So this led me to step back, and very fortunate through a good friend of mine who had been a client, I had the opportunity to do the spiritual exercises of Ignatian of Loyola, over a 2-year period of time. Normally, as you well know, it's a 4-week thing, but we had the opportunity to do it over 2 years and really spending time to revisit, my life journey, what gave me energy, the presence of God in my life, and try to discern my calling. So there's many different ways to try to, do that. Of course, Ignatius, the exercise is not a bad way. And then maybe the last milestone I mentioned was in 2009. So I was CEO of Counsel and Companies at the time. And I started to work with a coach. And before that, if somebody had told me, look, and you know that in your profession, right? Jack or Mary are working with a coach, I would say, what's wrong with them, right? Are they in trouble? They're going to be fired. And then I realized that when I play tennis, I like to play with a pro to help me improve my forehand. Or when I ski, I like to ski with an instructor to, get better in the muggles or in the deep powder. And so maybe I should do the same in my professional life. And Marshall Goldsmith, my coach, really helped me profoundly because he helped me discover my quirks as a leader. And he's written this book, "What Got You Here Won't Get You There," and where it lists the quirks of successful leaders. And out of the 20 quirks he mentioned, I had 13. Like, wanting to be the smartest person in the room, adding too much value. And with his approach of doing a 360 and focusing on what you can do differently in the future, kind of change the past, right? That helped me get better at taking feedback, asking for advice, getting to a place where my favorite phrase is, "My name is Hubert and I need help," which is the opposite of what we are taught, right? To be the superhero who saves the day and tells other people what to do, right? So that was he had quite an impact on my leadership approach.
Yeah. No, I love that. And for everyone that's hearing this and probably thinking, wow, there's just a lot of great content there and it's hard to absorb it this quickly. This is all in this book. If I can get it on the screen and not be so blurry, there you go. You got to
Yeah.
read the book because it's in there in great detail, and there's some wonderful anecdotes. So I'm going to keep promoting this.
And by the way,
because,
Brian, we need to be clear with people that my proceeds from the book are going to help fund the Best Buy Teen Tech Centers, which are for underserved communities and disadvantaged kids, and helping them acquire technology skills. I think we're on our way to having 100 of them across the country. There's a handful in the cities. And so as Brian and I are emphasizing the book, it's not about Brian and I getting rich in the process, it's about helping kids. So if you're hesitant about buying the book, just buy the book for the kids, okay?
Yeah. The ideas are wonderful. You'll love those. Obviously, it's financially set up to help that. I'm going to ask you a question about that, because those tech centers, you used a phrase, a word, disinvested communities is the term you use, and you often talk about the responsibility that organizations have to the community, and your answer to that is this: Best Buy tech centers to invest in disinvested communities. Where'd you come up with the phrase? What does that mean to you? And how's that going?
Yeah, so the Best Buy team came up with the phrase, but it raises a broader point, which is, um, business has changed so much in the last few years, right? It used to be all about shareholder value maximization. That was the mission, and the scope was the business, right? In a sense, the four walls of the business. Clearly, the mission has changed. In my view, it's about contributing to a noble purpose. Addressing needs in the world in a way that, of course, you need to make money, but that really helps the common good. And the scope has changed, right? Now business feels that it's not only responsible for its employees and its customers, but also the community and the environment. And of course, we are in the cities here, and following the horrible murder of George Floyd, which is, of course, as we all know, exactly a year ago to the day. When the city is on fire, cannot open the stores, cannot run a business. When the planet is on fire, cannot run a business. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, which is the world's largest investor, is emphasizing this with public company CEOs. That, what's your long-term purpose? What's going to be your impact on the environment and societal matters? So I think what we have to do, Brian, is make a declaration of interdependence, right? Business cannot be successful if the community is not successful. And so, of course, we've all seen in the last year how companies have mobilized to finally advance, diversity and inclusion, and do what they can to end, and if not end, shrink systemic racism. Also my wonderful successor, Corey at Best Buy, has partnered with other companies in the cities to an initiative called Connect Minnesota to bring broadband access and technology to communities and kids that don't have that ability to learn from home, in partnering with the governor on that. And the reason why it makes sense, it's not just charity and generosity, is that these are the children of our employees. If the children of our employees cannot learn from home, our employees and their mother in particular, we're seeing a decline in labor participation in the workforce of women, in part because in most families they're the ones who take care of the children, and so we need this declaration of interdependence. So yes, it's coming from the heart, but it makes business sense.
Yeah. Well, they shouldn't be disjointed, I don't think, and I think
that's right. I love this quote, Brian, from Godfather, right? Tell Michael I actually liked him. Nothing personal, it was only business. Oh no, business is personal.
Yes. Yes. Anytime you quote from The Godfather, you're doing great. So we're doing
exactly.
Good. So I want to just move forward a little bit, and this probably one of the influences in your life, and I know you've spoken often about Marilyn Carlson from Carlson Companies. She asked you a really interesting question in your interview before joining them. Can you share that question, and what did that signal to you?
Yeah, and by the way, the phrase declaration of interdependence, I first heard it from Marilyn, who's of course one of my heroes in life, because she got it right. We cannot be successful in isolation. Yes, so I was being interviewed by Marilyn to become her successor as the CEO of Calson. And during the interview, she did ask me, Hubert, tell me about your soul. Right? I know you interview a lot of candidates, Brian, but I don't know anybody else who ever really asked me that question or asked this question. And yet it's such a fundamental question because, again, one of the things we've rediscovered in the last year is that as leaders, we need to lead with all of our body parts, right? Of course, the head, but also the heart, the soul, the guts, the ears, and the eyes. I think a mistake that many leaders, self-included, made for way too long was to believe that we could lead essentially with our left brain, sometimes our right brain, but that we could have our head cut off from the rest of our body. And I think that makes no sense. And because what we're leading, who we're leading are human beings. And an artificial separation between work and life makes no sense. I think a turning point at Best Buy to connect it to business for us was one day, we'll always remember. So every quarter, Brian, we would get together the executive team to work on our strategy, our plans, our progress. And one time, probably 5 years ago, I asked them to come to that event with a picture of themselves when they were little. And over dinner, we shared with each other our life story and our dreams in life. What drives us? What's the meaning of our life? How do we want to be remembered? And that was a game changer. Because again, this gets rarely asked or covered, at least in my experience in the business world. And of course, what we discovered is that Greg was not just our chief marketing officer, or Mike was not just our chief merchant, or Corey was not just our CFO. They were human beings. And we also discovered that our purpose in life was quite aligned for 80% of us. There was a couple of exceptions. And that gave us the desire in our heart and the courage to say, well, we're the leadership team of Best Buy. Why don't we use Best Buy as a platform to be a force for good in the world? So not just be, and that was tied to when we defined our purpose as a company, we said, we're actually not, here's the scoop, we're not a retailer. Best Buy is not a retailer. It's a company that is in the business of enriching lives through technology by addressing key human needs. So see how it connects, our individual purpose as human beings, very much in line with what folks have put in the chat, with a noble business purpose, which of course has the advantage of inspiring and mobilizing everybody, but also has the advantage of vastly expanding our addressable market. A lot of the initiatives, strategic initiatives that we started and that are still flourishing, stem from this idea that we can go beyond being a retailer. So that's how we are helping aging seniors stay at home, stay in their home and live in their home longer independently, with the help of technology, putting sensors under their bed, their sofa, the bathroom, the kitchen, fall detection, and with remote monitoring and artificial intelligence and a customer care, a care center, we can help detect problems and so forth. We would never have thought about this if we had simply been a retailer.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that you're doing that. I have aging parents that are probably maybe a decade away from those needs, but I'm thinking about what that can actually do to be practical and helpful and for everybody involved. And so I'm super grateful for that move. It is interesting when you talk about purpose and what that does to people. So going forward in your book, you share an anecdote about stonecutters. Share that one, because that's kind of the practical implications for all of the workforce that kind of rallies around a noble purpose.
Yeah, because the reaction when we talk about these things can be the harsh reality of most people is that work is actually dull. I think Gallup has done surveys in companies on average, less than 20% of people are fully engaged. And Brian, I remember my first job when I was 16, working in a supermarket in France, putting price tags on pecans. I guarantee you I was not inspired. In fact, one day I got hit by a forklift. There was fighter jets, going over in the sky. So everybody looked up, including the driver of the forklift. And I got hit in the back. And so I had 2 weeks off, paid. I was in heaven. I didn't have to work, right? And so for most people, work is not fun. So if we can find meaning in our work, then it's transformative. So the stonecutter, so this is in Paris, in the 13th century. And there's two guys who are cutting stones, and there's a passerby who asks them, so what are you doing? And the first one, well, can't you see I'm cutting stones, right? It's pretty obvious. In some kind of language that may not be the current French language. And then the other guy said, oh, moi, sir, I'm building a cathedral. Quite different, same task, quite different. How does that apply in day-to-day work at all levels, right? Because it's what I'm talking about is for all of us at every level in companies. And I've been so inspired by our frontliners, our blue shirts and Geek Squad agents at Best Buy. So let me tell you a very concrete example that has stuck with me in my mind. It's like it's branded,
Yeah.
There's a young mother who, her child or young boy, for holidays, for Christmas, had a dinosaur toy. Unfortunately, the dinosaur toy is really sick. The reason why the dinosaur toy is sick is that the head is dismantled from the body. So great, right? So they go back to the store, to Best Buy, where they bought probably Santa bought the dinosaur toy. Now, at most stores, it would be sent to the toy aisle, and with some luck, would still be one available, and you could buy a replacement. That is not what happened on that day in that store. And there's two blue shirt associates who saw what happened, understood deeply what happened, took the dinosaur, went behind a counter, and started performing a surgical procedure on the dinosaur. And if you're following Good Doctor, and by the way, the new season of Good Doctor on Amazon is now available, I just learned yesterday. He walked the child through the steps in the surgical procedure. Of course, substituted a new dinosaur, but gave to the child a cured dinosaur. So you can imagine the joy of the child and the mother. Now, Brian, do you think there's a standard operating procedure at Best Buy on how to deal with sick dinosaurs? Or maybe a memo from me as the very smart CEO. What do you do if you have something like this happening? Of course not. These two associates found it in their heart to want to do this. And they also felt, by the way, they had the freedom to do this. And when I learned about that story, I was blown away. And it coincided with the time when the comparable sales at Best Buy, so that's how retail we measure our growth on a same store basis, were going through the roof. They were starting to really accelerate. And that really helped me understand what was going on. Yes, there was some good plans we were putting together, but what was happening at the company was human magic was being unleashed. And at scale, you had tens of thousands of individuals who thought that their job was not to force somebody to buy something, but to bring happiness and enrich lives, through the stuff we were selling and build, lifelong connections with our customers.
Yeah, those are cathedral builders.
Yes,
I like it. So I'm just going to switch a little bit to some of the younger generation and their mindset about work, which that stonecutter story certainly does give you a mindset about work. Hopefully that purpose can be found through the leadership team of the company you work for, but I think sometimes you have to sort of personalize that too. You're using your talents to give and serve others. I think a lot of people commented to your question about that. Why do we work? To certainly serve others was a pretty consistent answer. So, but you talked about in the book a conversation, without getting into a lot of details, a conversation you had with your kids at Christmas time. And I don't know how long ago this was. And you have adult children in the workforce. So my question really is, what's the most important professional advice you've given to them that you could share with our younger audience today?
Yeah, and before I do this, I want to add one thing to what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
It's a very practical application of this idea of connecting our individual purpose with the purpose of the company. So there was a store general manager in Boston, Justin. He would ask every one of the associates in the store, what is your dream? At Best Buy, outside of Best Buy, what is your dream? Write it down in the break room, right? And then he told the associates, look, my job is to help you achieve your dream. So the implication for all of us as leaders and coworkers is this, have the curiosity to deeply understand what drives people around you, and then see how that can connect with what they're doing, and then work with them, in support of their achieving their dream.
Yeah.
But back to your question. So, with my children, what advice do I share with them? It's, in large part, same advice I got from others, frankly. And there's maybe three things that resonate with me. The first one that I learned from one of my good friends, Jim Citron, who's actually when you start the book, he's the Jim in Jim You're Crazy story.
Yeah.
He's a senior partner at Spencer Stewart Search Firm, and he once wrote a column in Yahoo Finance years ago. We said the best leaders don't climb to the top; they are carried to the top. So it's not about having sharp elbows. This is about doing your best where you are, and then assuming that quote unquote God will provide, and that opportunities will be provided to you. Insurers now have to nuance this. I think this is better advice for the boys than for the women, right? Because I think there's, in general, we the boy tend to. You may see that in your trade. If we're 80% ready for a promotion, we'll say, "Oh, we got it. We're ready." If a woman in general is 125% ready for a promotion, most women, and Sally Helgerson has written this great book, How Women Rise, talks about it. Most women will say, "Oh, I'm not sure I'm ready. Plus, I'm not sure I've finished what I was doing." And so, for women, my advice is slightly different. So I have a boy and a girl, a son and a daughter. Is that the advice for women would be, don't forget to stick your neck out, right? Like the way the tortoise progresses is by sticking its neck out. So for women, more encouragement there. Another piece of advice from a great friend, Russ Fraden, who was our lead director at Best Buy. He told me when I was working with him at McKinsey 30 years ago, I was asking him for advice. He said, well, two things. One, tell the truth. Two, do what's right. I said, Russ, give me some useful advice. No, he said, no. If you do this consistently, you'll stay out of trouble. And sometimes it's easy to forget. And then the third piece of advice, which is also a piece of advice so at Harvard, we have a program for new CEOs, but I think that applies to everybody, which is where we ask them to write their retirement speech. How do you want to be remembered? Even better is write your eulogy. What would you like people to say on that last day when you won't be able to hear it? Right? Write it down. Or it can be a letter to, that you write, 60 years from now to your younger self, right? And then it's your purpose, it's your true north, as our good friend Bill George, would say. And then don't lose that, retirement speech or that statement of purpose or your eulogy, and revisit it regularly, right? In your meditation, in your contemplation.
Oh, that's really good. So I'm going to ask Hubert one more question, but then I'm going to open this up to all the audience to ask questions of Hubert that they would have. So get your questions ready. You can type them into the chat channel. We'll be paying attention, but once we get through this next question, we'll address yours. So if you have any, make sure to share them. So this is kind of the big question of why would you go from Carlson Companies to Best Buy at a time when Best Buy, I have to be honest, I sitting in this community, I was sort of heartbroken about Best Buy. There was great pride, and they kind of rose above and defeated Circuit City. And as a guy being competitive, I was like, yeah, our guys won. And now we see it at the precipice of following in the footsteps of Circuit City. And that was heartbreaking to watch. And obviously, in the community, and everyone knows people that work for Best Buy. So what propelled you to do that?
Yeah, so this is 2012, and you're right. Right? At the time, everybody thought Best Buy was going to die. There was zero buy recommendation amongst the analyst community on the stock. And plus, I knew nothing about retail, which was, and so when I get the call from the headhunter, I said, Jim, you're crazy, right? I know nothing about retail. And this place, and I had a lot of respect for Best Buy because I had been a vendor to Best Buy 20 years ago. And I had asked Brad Anderson, a former CEO of Best Buy, to join our board at Calson's. So I had a lot of respect, but it was very concerning. Amazon was really, the shift to online was threatening the company. Apple and Microsoft were opening their own stores. Quality of service had gone down. My predecessor had been fired, and the share price was going down precipitously. And the wonderful Dick Schultz, didn't know him at the time, but wanted to do a take private of the company. So this was the all-you-can-eat menu of tenants. But my good friend Jim said, no, they're not looking for a retailer. They have plenty of retailers within Best Buy. They're looking for somebody who's going to take a fresh perspective. And you have a lot of experience with turnarounds and transformations. I think this is perfect for you. And you also knew that at the time, after 8 years working with the wonderful Calson family, I was ready to move on for a variety of reasons that I don't need to get into here. And so he convinced me that I should take a look. And what I saw was that the world actually needed Best Buy, right? Because as customers, for some of our purchases, it's good to be able to touch and feel the product and ask questions. So the customers needed Best Buy, and the vendors, importantly, needed Best Buy because they need a place where to showcase the fruit of their billions of dollars of R&D investments. And so there was nothing wrong with Best Buy. The world needed Best Buy. What was wrong was, all of the wounds were self-inflicted, frankly. Prices were not competitive. The online experience was horrendous. Speed of shipping was bad. The stores had become quite dull, and the cost structure was bloated. So the good news, if the problems are self-inflicted, is that you can correct them. And I thought that saving and then rejuvenating, this great icon, could be fun. And I love challenges, so I said, okay, so this should be fun. And I got convinced. I talked to a lot of people, including Brad, and I felt I could add value there. So this would be a good thing to do.
Awesome. Well, we've got a couple questions that have come in. One from Charlie. He asked, as a senior executive, how did you build trust with thousands of blue shirts across the country?
Yeah, and it's a challenge because as you point out, Charlie, everybody is distributed, right? We have 1,000 stores just in the U.S., and even if you try hard, you can't visit all of them. And the truth is that in a sense, size of company doesn't matter, right? Because as a leader, we work directly with, let's say, 10 people, and then indirectly with 100 people, and then the rest of the organization, it's much more indirect. And so the key is to focus on, building trust with people around you, essentially. Now, I did spend my first week on the job working in the store in St. Cloud. I don't know why they say St. Cloud, by the way, Brian. I think they should say St. Cloud or something, but irrespective, I didn't manage to get them to change the name of that wonderful town. Because I felt that this is where I could learn, right? If I went to the front line, I could learn from the frontliners, the blue shirts, the store general manager, Noska, what's going well, what's not going well. And I think that's the first place where we build trust, because I certainly listened. They had a lot to teach me. And then we did something with what they told us. And I think the way you build, so my philosophy around trust is I give trust immediately. I don't need people to prove to me that they're trustworthy. I give trust immediately. I think it's easier. Now, sometimes I do get disappointed, but I think it's easier to give trust and then to earn the trust of others, right? So I approach it in an asymmetric, relationship. And I think we worked then, and it was same with the investors, where we worked on our say-do ratio, the ratio between what we said we would do and what we actually did. And a good way to build trust is actually to consistently do what you said you would do.
Yeah.
And then, by the way, if things are not working, to be transparent, right? To celebrate the wins, but also say, oh, that didn't work the way we intended, or we are struggling with this. You know, one of the lessons I think all of us as leaders have learned in the last few years is learn to be vulnerable, to say, and say, I don't know, right? And part of it is, there's so many curveballs that have been thrown at us, right? Did anybody get the playbook on how to deal with the pandemic before last year, right? Did you have the playbook, Brian?
I did not.
You did not, right? Nobody did. And so, you know, when that's the case, there's no way you can say, oh, I got it, I know how to do this. No. And I was still on the chairman of the board last year when it happened. I saw Corey reach out to, you know, the medical profession, the scientists, other CEOs, and ask questions and ask for advice. And so if you can tell, and then she would tell our team, this is what we know, right? This is what we don't know. And this is what we're doing to try to figure out, you know, what we don't know and then what to do with it. And so these are some of the things that help build trust. And then once you've built trust with, you know, the store in SendCloud, you know, then word of mouth, I don't know, but I'm guessing that once they had spent a few days or hours with me, the messaging inside the company would start, and people would say, he's got this funny accent, we don't know what to think of that, or you know, things like that.
Yeah. You know, one thing I personally observed, and this is just in talking to the parish about the prospects of this event, people would come forward that said, I used to work for Best Buy, or I worked for Best Buy, and Hubert always used to come into the stores. He was incredible. That proximity you had to the blue shirts, that being known by the blue shirts. It didn't matter if all blue shirts knew you, but the fact that you were proximate to them and what they were doing, you listened to them as your first step into the organization. I think that inherently builds trust. He's listening to us.
Yeah, and the key thought, you know, if we want to simplify things, going back to purpose and humanity, all of the stakeholders, as we sometimes call them, are human beings, right? Employees are human beings. Customers are human beings. Our partners, you know, people like Apple and Samsung and Sony and so forth, they're human beings. The shareholders, you know, they're not these you know, abstract, you know, money creation. They're a bunch of human beings. Many of us have given them some money to manage. They're like us. They're also parents and children. They care about the planet like we do. They care about the community, and they're trying to do their best. And if you can treat, that's one thing I learned from my coach Marshall. You know, the way he phrased it was treat everybody as a customer. Because we like to deal with customers, right?
Yeah.
So if you respect and try to earn the trust of everybody, and be transparent and honest, I mean, that's a good, I think that was good advice from my coach. I'm just sharing that.
Yeah, we're getting lots of good questions here. So one from Jeff, he says, you mentioned Ignatian Exercises, which is, by the way, where Hubert and I met. We met at de Montreville, the Ignatian Retreat House. And so that's what brought us here today. So he's wondering if you still participate in those Ignatian Exercises, and how often do you do that?
Yeah, I do. I still exercise spiritually. I think it's, I try my best. And guess what? I'm not perfect, right? My name is Hubert, I'm not perfect. But that's certainly one of the lessons we've all, again, learned during this crisis. Remember, Brian, when we used to fly a long time ago, right? Yeah. When the oxygen mask would come down, we would be told to put the mask on ourselves first before we could help others. And so I think from a leadership standpoint, again, all of us are leaders, minimum leaders of our own lives. And I saw so many great examples last year of leaders deciding to slow down and say, okay, let's reflect here. As we go through this crisis, how do I want to be remembered? What principles do I want to follow? And then taking care of ourselves regularly, because this is hard.
Yeah.
And I think it's good. It's, the struggles we've been going through, help us, become better human beings. And so, yes, the daily examen prayer that Ignatius, encourages us to do is the best. And revisiting our day. Now, I don't do it every day, but I try to do it every week. And I keep a journal. That is so helpful. And then one of the things I've learned is to be kind to ourselves in these prayers, right? So it's the way I formulate the question is, and this has a Buddhist connotation. So I take from,
Oh, sure.
did I do my best today? To be a good father, or to deal with Jack or Mary, or to deal with my board, and it's not, was I perfect? Right. And if I rate myself on a scale of 1 to 10, I give myself a 4 today, there's always tomorrow.
Yeah.
And one of the things that there's a chapter in the book around which is something I learned from one of the two monks, Father Samuel, is the quest for perfection can be evil. Right. And if one of the things I've learned, if to love others, of course we need to start by loving ourselves. And not to the point of being blind, right?
Right.
But to accept that we're human beings, and that we need help. And so that self-reflection, yes, I think it's indispensable. I try my best.
Yeah.
And I've learned to, focus on doing my best as opposed to the results. So that's another leadership lesson that's very different from what we learn at business school.
Yeah.
What matters is not the results, it's our efforts. Did I do my best? I actually don't control the results. I have to make peace with this, right?
Yeah, no, I love that. I think one of the things that I've heard you say that I appreciate so much, and sort of writing your eulogy, writing how you want to be remembered. If you do that when your mind is quiet and in those reflective periods, you're going to write something that's really good. If you try to write that same thing amidst the chaos of the day, it's probably not going to look quite as holy and quite as good for humanity. So when you do those spiritual exercises, that's the time to sort of plan, what do you want to leave behind? Because then you will write something that holds you accountable to something that I would say is holy and good. So I've got another interesting question, and this is from an interesting individual. This individual's name is Dave, and I know Dave personally. He used to be the chief culture officer under Steve Hemsley at United Health Group.
Oh, okay.
So worked very closely with Steve. So he says, how did you look at culture of Best Buy as you came in as CEO? In addition to clarity of purpose, what did you do to shift the culture there?
Yeah, so hi Dave. And I see also Bernadette's name just beneath.
Yeah.
Hello, Bernadette. Good to hear from you.
Yeah.
So Best Buy's culture, the DNA is just fabulous. Dick Schultz and Brad Anderson, two amazing, wonderful souls and human beings, had created, in many ways, no place is perfect, right? But there was some really good stuff around people and customers. And anybody in the group who knows Dick or Brad knows exactly what I'm talking about. The problem from 2009 to 2012 is the culture had deteriorated. So yes, I'm a Catholic, but I'm also a Maoist. Okay. I believe that fish rot from the head. And when things are going well in organizations, you always credit the frontliners. If things are not going well, you have to look at the top. And my impression is that because Best Buy had won, right, against Circuit City, and by the way, in business, you never win, right? Because it's not like a football game, there's no end. So if you decide that you've won, that's complacency and you're dead. And so there was some complacency that had been installed. And so, we became too self-confident. And so therefore we became detached from the field and the front line. and got distracted with international growth and so forth. So to change that, we didn't start a series of workshops around let's revisit our values or things like that, because when the ship is sinking, that's not a good time to do this, frankly. But my approach to change management was to change management. At the top of the company, there was a few people who either were not motivated or their heart was not into it, or for whatever reason. And usually at companies, you actually know who these people are, and people are just waiting for you to act. And it's not about being harsh. These people left the company and had wonderful next steps in their career. Here, I'm really talking about the top. And then, so first question, how do you change management? By changing management. And then how do you change behaviors? Is by changing behaviors. I used to get paid a lot to say these things, Brian. By that, what do I mean? If we say we're going to be customer focused, well, we focus on the customers and we do things that customers care about, like making sure our prices would be competitive, improving the online shopping experience, in doing the partnership with the vendors, that would improve the stores, and giving the tools to the frontliners so that they could do their job. So you try to impact that directly, and then later on, and I get into a lot of details in the book. So we had two phases, right? Renew Blue, which actually the turnaround, people were telling me, cut, right? Close stores, cut headcounts. And you guys were in the cities when we did it. For the most part, it was a very human-centric approach, right? It was about listening to the frontliners, cutting headcount as a last resort, first focusing on growing revenue, cutting non-salary expenses, which is all of the elements of the cost structure that have nothing to do with people, and only cutting headcount as a last resort, and focusing on creating energy, because that's what we do as leaders. So that was Renew Blue. And then the second phase was building the new blue, which was more the growth-oriented. What kind of company do we want to look like when we grow up? And there was a lot of focus on culture and creating an environment where, human magic, like I was describing earlier with my two blue shirts and the dinosaur, could be unleashed. Yeah. And that's a lot of work. And here at Central, we can use the parable of the sower. Right? If you throw the seeds in the rocks or in the bushes, the seeds are not going to grow. So our role as leaders is to make sure that the soil is fertile, and that when you plant seeds of purpose and humanity, then it's going to grow. And in the book, because I'm French originally, so I talk about the 5 ingredients, of my recipe for creating human magic. So big learnings for me in that journey.
Yeah, I think one of the things I heard you say, or I've seen you comment on often, and I can't remember the gentleman's name. I think he might have been in your communications department, but aggregating stories. And I think using stories, because people will start to believe things based on the stories that are consistently being shared. And you had somebody aggregate stories that you wanted out.
Yeah, because this is how we learn. Because you can talk about abstract concept like being people focused or customer focused. What does that mean, right? So stories make it concrete, and that's how we learn, and that's how we make meaning. So it's capturing moments that matter, where something happened that's really meaningful, and that say, no, more like this is what we want, and maybe less like that.
No, I love that. So maybe one last question here, and then we'll wrap up. This is from Anne. Anne said, as an executive, how have you navigated differences of opinion or values with your board?
Yeah, so, well, I've navigated well. Seriously. So once we reconciled with Dick, and so we embarked on a journey to refresh our board. The board had shrunk, people had left the board. So we built a wonderful board with people who had relevant experience to what we were trying to accomplish. Diverse board. When I stepped down from the board, we had a majority of women and 3 Black directors on purpose. And I saw the board as a group of individuals that could give us superhuman powers, right? Because they would augment our skills, wanted to absolutely make sure I would take input from our board. And we used a process, every so often we would ask actually a third party to come and talk to our board members and our executives to see how we could improve our effectiveness as a board and our work as a board, to shape the agenda together and so forth. And I was also very clear with my board members, look, I'm asking you for input, but not individual direction, right? If I have 10 people who give me direction and expect that I'm going to do everything they suggest, that's not going to work, right? So aggregate direction from the board, yes, but and so by saying this, by the way, that gave them the freedom to share their input because they knew I would filter and only take it if I thought it would fit well. Also, I remember one time, so in August of 2019, you'll remember this, the Business Roundtable, which is the top, close to 200 CEOs in the country, issued a statement on the purpose of the corporation and the importance of stakeholders, really killing, the idea of shareholder primacy. And that's a big deal, this idea that, of course, I'm a big advocate for, this idea of, business is about pursuing a noble purpose and embracing all stakeholders and treating profit as an outcome and putting people at the center. And so we did have a debate. We spent a couple of hours as a board discussing this. And I was no longer the CEO at the time, I was just executive chairman. I wanted Corey to have a good sense of where the board stood on that. And we spent a good 2 hours discussing that, what it meant for each of us and so forth. And it felt that we were sufficiently aligned. You don't need to be 100% aligned. If it's 80% aligned, that was good enough for what we needed to do. But really treated the boards with, again, customers and treating them with respect and transparency, like everybody else around us, is the way we approach this.
Yeah, we are wrapping up. So I would love to ask more questions. There's some great questions out here. I apologize for not being able to get to all of them. I want to be respectful of Hubert's time. I'm still sort of amazed that he has agreed to join us at this dusty little Roman outpost here in Rosemount, Minnesota, called St. Joseph's. But Hubert, it's been really a privilege and a joy to do this with you today. And I'm so grateful for it. And we'll continue to pray for you. I think your message is powerful. I think it needs to be shared. And hopefully there's some real roots to this movement that I know you're embarked on. So thank you.
Yeah, and I see Josh Will also writing. Hello, Josh, and everyone. And I think, yes, it's, I think all of us are called to do our best, I think, to contribute to this, to creating this future that does not exist yet, but that needs to be better. And sometimes you can wait for, other people to do something, wait for Washington to, do what they need to do, and I think what we all know is that, it starts from within, and we have the opportunity and the duty in many ways to create a good world around us. And the book is written as a guide for, every leader who is keen to lead from a place of purpose and with humanity. So I hope it's helpful to folks. That's why I've written it. Yeah. And I wish everybody well on their own journey. We're all travelers, right? I don't have the corner on wisdom. Brian, you know this, but I was pleased to have the time to write this.
Yeah. Well, again, I can tell you that the book has been personally very helpful. So thank you. And I'm sure it'll be helpful to anyone else that takes the time to dig into it. But again, beyond grateful. Love that you did this with me, and just honored and humbled that you're.
Good to see you, Brian. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And for all that showed up today, thank you for showing up and giving us an hour of your time to listen to Hubert and all that he had to share for us. So with that, I say adieu.
Adieu.
Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.